was it 2019 when Heartland was in Cleveland?
Yes.
So you may not know this, but you are the reason that we reopened our warehousing in Cleveland, which was because we went to Heartland, and Ellie had the fine joy of hanging out with all of my friends for 10 days. And then at the same time, Microcosm was about to open our warehousing in Indiana, also in your territory, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And but then after that trip, Ellie was like, well, why don't we just like bring back all the 90s people to Microcosm and open the warehousing there?
And then we did.
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Ellie Blue, the Vice President of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
This week, we are joined by special guest, Larry Law, Midwest Bookseller Association head, what is called colloquially GLEBA. Can you,
Larry? Surely you can do better than that.
Larry, who are you and what do you do?
Help us, Larry.
Yeah, my name's Larry Law. I'm actually the executive director of the Great Lakes Independent Booksellers Association in the Midwest. So we think of us as the eastern half of the Midwest, starting Illinois and Wisconsin, going east to like Ohio and Kentucky. So
Nice.
that's me. I'm. Thank you. Yeah. Our office is just west of Chicago, kind of where I'm physically located.
Nice. Just west of Chicago, you said?
Yes.
And does to like be a member of GLEBA, does a state have to be touching a Great Lake?
No, we have Kentucky, which somehow snuck in there. Yeah.
Do you have New York State?
No.
What about Tacoma, Washington? They're kind of part of the Midwest, I think.
Right. Culturally, anyway. Yes.
All right.
You should look into them.
Before we get angry letters from people about
what is and is not the Midwest or
my
a Great
ignorant
Lake
comments.
What about Ontario?
Can you tell us more?
I had a big conversation about that last night. I have states that don't consider themselves Midwest. States, half of the state considers themselves Midwest, but everybody's a Great Lake except for Kentucky. But
I'd make
we'll gladly include Kentucky.
Pittsburgh, lots of things we can move into your territory.
Just don't mess with Texas.
Yes. So, like, what does a trade association like GLEBA do?
So our mission is to advocate for bookstores in the Midwest. And part of that includes like creating compelling programming, education. We offer a catalog, showing that we're not just flyover country. We're a vital marketplace for books and booksellers and publishers and indie publishing especially. So a big part of my job and our mission is to, find out what bookstores in our region need. How can we provide that? How can we get booksellers? Most importantly to me, how can we get booksellers and publishers together? What are the current issues? And then how do we create compelling programming that will, draw in this huge influx of new bookstores that we have?
So what are the things that you do towards that end that work the best?
So, for me, I worked in a bookstore for 16 years, and it wasn't until really the last 5 years of my bookselling career that the wider bookselling world really opened up to me, as far as GLEBA and being part of a regional association and being part of a national trade association like the ABA. And it's huge for me, just seeing how big our industry is, how small we are in it, what role we play in it. So a big part of my mission coming into this job was, how do we attract bookstores? How do we create compelling and cool enough programming to get into our events and then provide them with that education that will inevitably help them, the not interesting things like how to create a budget, how to do returns, how to set up, accounts with publishers like that. My first step is always what's going to get people there, what's exciting, what's cool, what's interesting, what's going to excite new booksellers. Because without new booksellers, there's no industry in the future. So that's the kind of the first step for us. And then after that, we get into like more advanced things like educational sessions and incorporating the catalog into your store and things like that. I kind of lost track there. Was that full?
Yeah.
So like, what are some examples of services that you provide?
So one thing we're doing this year in May, it's the first year that Gleba is doing it. We're partnering with SIBA, the Southern Independent Booksellers Association, to create an indie press social. So it's an event at a bookstore in Louisville, Kentucky. We don't do a ton of events in Kentucky, so that was part of kind of our outreach in an area we wanted to work in. So we're having an event at a Carmichael's bookstore in Louisville. 8 presses will be there to talk about books, but also to talk about like their publishing house, like their mission, their philosophy, who they are as publishers, what they sell, how can they better work with stores. And then we're bringing bookstores there that want to have that to start making those connections, right? It can be difficult, the publishers are, our bookstores are being pitched to all over the place. There's publishers, I could understand how it feels like screaming into the void at times. So we think like this event is something really like specific and precise, and 8 featured presses from our region, from east, from the south, that want to get involved. So there's that part of the programming. And then to me, maybe the more important part is at the end of, we're doing like a big like bowling social event, which for me, like the show always happens in the in-between. And that's a big part of this event, is like getting everybody together and bowling and eating and drinking and just having a good time and getting to know each other and making those like physical connections. So that's one thing we're doing coming up that I think helps to facilitate that.
Very Midwestern bowling.
I love it. What are the
Yes.
what are the biggest challenges that you face in making these connections between booksellers and publishers?
I think, there's so many, there's a lot. And of course we always want to like feature publishers in our region, but I find now, like, so when I became director in 2018, we had like 130 stores. Now we have 265, I think, last time I checked. And yeah, so it's crazy. So the hardest thing I'm finding right now is keeping up with that, and like finding the time to do outreach to new stores and bring them in and make sure our programming is relevant to them, because they're starting from all different places with all these influx of new stores. How can we bring in more diverse stores? What kind of programming do they need? How, it's for me, it's always been not really a content issue. It's like a pipeline issue. How to get booksellers into the organization, familiar with us, working with us, finding out what they need. That's I feel like the ongoing issue. Just finding booksellers and making sure they are aware of us and they know what we do and can participate.
Are you finding that a lot of the newer bookstores have different needs than sort of the legacy bookstores did?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like the conversations I have with new booksellers and new bookstores and bookstores bookstores that were founded by like young booksellers versus these legacy stores, like those conversations are very different. Like, talk to a legacy store that I haven't met or that I'm getting to know. It's often like a pitch, like, this is what we do, this is how long we've been in business, like telling them stores to me, which is great, and it gets me an idea. But working with these and talking to new stores, it feels more like a really like grassroots community, like a community organization. Like, they're already working together, they're already like doing what Gleba is doing, they're already partnering. So it's really interesting, and they're ready to like jump in and like be a part of the organization and like figure out where they fit in, which is awesome. And like one of the most important things, I think, like anybody that is willing, and like exactly what this podcast is doing, like willing to jump in and offer services to help everybody else is the best thing I think anybody in this industry can do, and so generous and helpful. So I have a lot of hope for all these new stores because they're already kind of starting on the right foot. But yeah, that's kind of the difference I see, is the they're coming into it like ready to work with each other, and they already know each other, and it's exciting.
Well, I mean, it's so nice to like be part of a community of other people that are doing what you're doing and care about what you care about, and you're making that possible. So that's really awesome. What about publishers? That's a big part of our audience. I remember when I first got involved in the industry, I was so perplexed by the regional trade associations. It seemed like a lot of what they were offering was like advertising and other things that like we don't really do. And like, there was the fall events, which were always really cool, but it was always really kind of like hard to tell like what was working for us and what wasn't. Like, do you have advice for publishers who want to get involved with this organization, reach out to connect to booksellers? Like, yeah, what's the deal for us?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways, and like it's tough because there's not like a one stop answer for this question. It's like it'll be a million different things depending on the publisher. Like, I mean, how I got to know you guys is very different than how I'm working with other publishers. You guys are doing cool stuff. I reached out to you guys to see if you wanted to go out to a dinner, and then here we are, a year or two later, doing this, and I think we have a much better relationship. And so, yes, we offer advertising. Yes, that's a big part of it. It's a revenue generator for us. We offer like advertising in our catalog, which is our number one revenue generator, which is very important to us. But there's tons of other ways that you can be involved. The trade show, the Heartland Fall Forum, Spring Forum are very important. And for events like those, yes, if you want a table, those things do cost. But like Spring Forum, Rep Night, Indie Press Social, if you're not participating in the programming, you are still, if you're a member, you are welcome to come. And I encourage everybody to do that. I think that's one of the most important things you can do, just face-to-face time with booksellers. We like rep nights, things like that. And then there's like smaller things, which you might not think about, like submitting to our awards program, right? It's all about, like, for me, with an indie press, repeatedly getting you on the radar of my booksellers over and over. They're being sold to, every day, all day by publishers. And if you're on my radar, then you're going to be on my bookseller's radar, right? So there's tons of things that you can do that don't really cost. So like I just said, the awards program, you could submit to our awards program. If you become a finalist or a winner, those books generally stay on our bestseller list for months, weeks, and then some, Dan Egan, like years will be on there. And that's, something that doesn't cost anything. And that's a huge bonus. We do during the pandemic. This is I think this is a big, not exciting thing, but a cool thing that we do that we started during the pandemic. So we started collecting data from booksellers about the genres that they prefer to read and where they would like ARC sent. So this goes on beyond like the bookstore. And this is something that's shared freely with all of our publishers. So we have a couple hundred booksellers that are on it. I think it's the most valuable information that we have to share. Part of that was we wanted to cut down on waste as far as like printing and sending ARCs. When I worked at the bookstore, I'd get tons of ARCs every week, and half of them would end up on the table and half of them would end up being recycled. So that was a big part of it. The other part of it is, how do we get publishers on the radar of the booksellers that want to sell those books or do those mid-list or mid-list titles? So that's another big, I think, helpful thing as far as like connecting publishers and booksellers. I would recommend something else that doesn't cost is getting involved with our education. Most of our events throughout the year are education is a big part of our programming. So we're always looking for like publishers, reps to be part of our education, specifically in Portland. And that's a great way to get in front of booksellers and, hear and understand the problems that they're dealing with, and then you as a resource for them outside of just, selling books.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's like harder to understand that a trade association isn't just like putting out their hand and asking for money. Like, it's like in a well-run organization like yours, it's reciprocal, where it's like you're providing services that people need. And because the perception in our side of the industry is that for a lot of these programs, the function of them is funding the organization rather than like a true value chain where like everybody is benefiting by touching it, I don't know. And there's something about your region where like, I hate to generalize, but like it just has a different work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
And like people kind of come at it with differing kinds of motivation, not necessarily like different amounts, and but the actual thing I enjoyed the most about that particular heartland was that bookseller after bookseller came up to our booth, picked up the post-structuralist vulva coloring book, and said, why don't I have this in my store? And don't do that at the West Coast event.
That's
So
incredible. I love hearing that.
Why is your region so special?
Yeah, why are you all so cool?
What a question. I don't know. I think there's could be a lot of different answers to that. Like the stores and publishers that I find myself working with all the time have like this very DIY, tons of hustle, and almost like punk ethos part of their like mission and who they are. And I'm of course attracted to that, but I think that we're a region of like, we don't like being told what we can and can't do. We're gonna just do it ourselves and make it happen. And we have all these great publishers that are putting out these incredible books, and we have bookstores that are popping up all over the place. I think that's part of it. It's just there's a lot of hustle and there's a lot of drive and there's excitement and enthusiasm, and people see that in each other, and the connection is like easy, right? There's like the shorthand already there between the stores that it takes to get things done and just doing it themselves. I think you guys are a great example of that. I think $2 Radio is a great example of that like, Midwestern mindset. Why can't we do this? Let's just do it.
Totally. I have a question that we've been asking booksellers, and you as a previous bookseller and with experience all over the industry. Can you talk to our readers a little bit about what are things you notice that publishers think booksellers want, but booksellers actually don't want? And what do you wish publishers knew? Or more publishers knew?
Publishers knew. That's so hard.
Oh, sorry. We didn't prep you for that.
No, that's fine.
We only ask hard questions on this program.
I have some softball.
Well, gotcha podcast. Oh, that's so hard. Well, I'd say many things. You get a million different answers depending on the book you ask, but things that can be not easily would affect everybody are like points, better discounts, free shipping, things like that. Availability and access to authors is another big one that's really important to us in our region. We're flyover country. We see that in everything we do. So that's why I think you see a lot of big growth right now in indie publishing in the Midwest, and the sales of indie presses in the Midwest is a big part of it because these people live here. And that's important. That's really hard. I don't know. I haven't been asked that in a while, and I've been out of a bookstore for a minute about what publishers are doing that bookstores don't want. I don't know if I have a great answer for that.
Is there anything publishers are doing that regional trade association directors don't want?
What we don't want. No, I mean, I think something that's really important is building a good relationship with your rep. So it's not that we don't want, but I would love for more reps to come to our events and our shows and just meet bookseller and be in the events that we're doing. I think that's a huge first step for a lot of booksellers. One of the things that I get asked all the time is how to get author events. I'm like, there's no real easy answer. I mean, first step is you need to be probably ordering direct, right? You need to establish that relationship that you're selling books. Then you need to grow an audience and prove that you can sell a a mid-list title really well, and then you need to foster a good relationship with prep. And that's like, I think, a good way into that world. So come to our event, just talk to people. That's my pitch here.
That's great.
to publishers.
That's easily
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
and I do find, and this is the thing, the other thing, and not to stroke the ego of the booksellers in your region too hard for a second time, but this is one of the few regions where like I don't have to unpack the value proposition of like every single book to the booksellers, because in your region they're the kind, and like maybe it is that thing, maybe it's like the flyover country thing where they're so used to being ignored and passed by that they've had to build up these like critical thinking skills on their own, but they'll like walk up to the book, and then like I can walk them through the the sales points on it or whatever, and they're already like, oh yeah, I know this one, I get this, all of these would work in my store, whereas like in our region it's like you have to do a lot more of like, do you know who this author is? Are you familiar with this body of work? Do you know this series? And I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's like the coasts are just seemingly a bit more like handheld and like come to, and it's the same. Speaking of, it's the same way that like bands tour down the coasts, that like, and so like you go less and less often because you're like, oh, they'll be back. Yeah, they'll come in, whereas like in a certain region, you get a little more, you're excited when somebody comes, because, and then when Ellie and I used to do a tour called Dinner and Bikes, longtime fans of this program will remember. And that was kind of what we ran into also, is that like we found that like doing 7 cities in Indiana and 7 cities in Michigan and places like that was way better than like doing shows in like LA or because they just didn't take it for granted in your part of the country.
I think like to that, like, right, good bookstores are like a reflection of their community, right? But I also think the great bookstores are reflections of each other. So like stores in our region are very cooperative, and there's a lot of open communication. So said booksellers come to your, like, we have a couple of bookstores in Chicago that love your publisher, love your work, what your authors. They're going to make that known to all the other booksellers in our region, be like, you guys should be carrying this, you should be selling it. They're the best advocates for indie presses, each other. I think they're going to be better sold to than any rep or hearing directly from the publisher if it's coming from a bookseller. And our region is really good about that. There's a lot of, we have a Discord server that, it's been super helpful with keeping lines of communication open. But I think the big that we talk to each other and we know what everyone's reading and we know what everyone's super passionate about. So
I love that.
If a few bookstores have heard of you, a lot of bookstores have probably heard of you.
So what's the sort of balance, or is there like a balancing act or a tension or anything between sort of like the independent publishers and the big 5 still, right?
A few more minutes.
I got used to saying big 4 for preemptively, and now I can't keep track.
Yeah. Is there any tension, like, do you mean between them or with?
I guess like in your activities, are you like,
in your offerings?
Like, do you feel like you have to like work hard to prioritize independent publishers, or is there, how does that work?
I think we have to like think about how we do programming differently. Like, we're not getting a ton of pitches from smaller indie presses for like our large or keynote author events, right? But then we want to make sure you're a big part of our programming. So that's where something like the Indie Press Social or like Rep Night comes in, where it's a much more even playing field. You don't have to worry about like sending an author and spending nights on hotels and things like that. So I think what's going to fit you guys isn't going to fit like Harper or PRH, right? So you have to figure out what fits you guys and what is important to you guys, and it's like affordable. Like, what you were saying about like we can be seen as like asking for money. Like most of our events, like Spring Forum and Indie Press Social, we lose money on those, right? Like the catalog is kind of our number one revenue generator, and it's a super important program, but like we're spending the money where we think it's most important, and that's something like the Indie Press Social. It's Spring Forum, it's these rep nights, it's owners retreats, things like that. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, because and I think there is a lot of like in our industry or industries, depending how you put it, it's like there's a lot of like wanting to demonize or like figure out whose like fault it is that things are a certain way, or that like certain books get a lot of attention while others don't, or I mean, and I guess it's like it's a jealous capitalistic world out there. So like whenever somebody else gets attention, what I see a lot of is people that are like, they're like jealous because they're like, but my great book didn't get all the love the way that one did. And you're like, well, it's not an either or situation. So like, do you frame like, do you like build your ideal when you're doing speakers placements or book placements? Are you normally taking that like based on what's pitched to you, or are you looking at it more in terms of like you're building your ideal program?
It's a little bit of both. So like for Spring Forum, I'll talk about Heartland a little bit and then Spring Forum. So Spring Forum, for example, that's a really regionally focused show, right? So we want to feature authors in our region. So part of that is want it diverse, right? We want representation from all of the states in our region if possible. But then so there's Chicago, so we definitely want to feature Chicago authors and writers. So that's kind of what we go into, and we get pitched a lot of authors, so we're able to like kind of curate through that. But then also we have like an example of our keynote. Christina Enriquez has a huge book right now. She's in Chicago, so we can feature her. So we're going to go after her, right? Then like at Heartland, for example, like specifically last year we had an event, like our opening night event was Jack White, Ben Blackwell in conversation with Hanifa Durkheeb, right? And that was something we built from the ground up because we knew it was going to be cool. We knew it would be a big draw. Hanif and Jack are both Midwestern boys. So it's exciting. It fulfills all these different things that we want to do. So that was one we really curated and really went after and put together. And the Indie Press Social too. Like what publishers in this region close to Louisville can we reach out to? It was our first year partnering with SEBA, so we didn't have as much input about who we reached out to, but that was who needs some eyes on them and who is close to this area we're going to be in. So it's a little bit of both. We'll always be curating what we get pitched, but we will also like reach out and be like, hey, can this author do this? But we also, of course, accept pitches for everything, because how else are we going to hear from you? If you're on our radar and we're not on yours. So
how do self-published authors play into this whole ecosystem that you are
they do a little bit that I've worked with. I mean, at the trade show, sometimes they'll come to a trade show, or occasionally they'll like advertise with us from like an email blast. So I don't work with them a ton as far as like putting them in front of our membership, right? One thing that we do help with is if they reach out to me, we'll ask for like resources, or like how can we get into bookstores, or I'm thinking about publishing, what's a good first step, things like that we'll help with. We don't have a ton that reach out that want to advertise or like work directly with us. And then if they want to come to a show like Spring Forum, usually it's that wouldn't happen because we have like 6 spots, so it's very tight. But Heartland and things like that's something we would consider if it's not published through Amazon or something, or if it's really regionally focused. But yeah, like I said, I don't have a ton of people self-pubs or knocking down my door to get in.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the weird rub. So we had Andrea from the Independent Book Publishers Association on the program, and she one of the things she talked about was that like oftentimes you'll have a service, but the value of the service to the self-published author isn't that great because they're not actually going to achieve sales through a placement like this. So I'm glad you kind of like sorted this out other ways, so that you're not like them something that isn't actually of value to them, And so, but so what are you most excited about in the future?
What do you have coming up? I mean, I'm excited to be in Milwaukee this year. This is the first time Heartland's been in Milwaukee, so I think that'll be a big draw, especially for like, I guess it'll be a big draw for like, for years, we kind of bounced back and forth between like Minneapolis and like Chicago suburbs. So now we're Cleveland was like the start of that, where we're trying to bounce around all over the place. So I'm really excited for that. I keep bringing it up, but I am super excited for the Indie Press Social, because it's like once a year we get to see publishers, like booksellers from SIBA, right? Usually at Winter Institute. We don't see them there. So I think that's it'll be a fun opportunity to see some of those bookstores and booksellers coming up. And then, like my, some of those, so there's a couple of the bigger like events have coming up, but also like on the side, I work with booksellers all the time as far as like merch and stuff like that. So we've got a few things in the works that I think we're going to be announcing around Independent Bookstore Day that I'm super excited about, like on a personal front. We did a few years ago, we did right before the pandemic, we did a series called Bar, where it was an author event that was partnered with a pop-up gallery. So we would have like original pieces of art created based on these books, and then we had like a gallery showing, and we had the authors there, so the authors would present, and then the artist talk about art that was inspired by their work. So we're hoping to bring that back in the near future. So that's something I would be excited. We did 3 of them. We have a very cool venue like just outside of Chicago that's really cool. So that's something else.
Neat.
Yeah.
So like we're running a little low on time, but I wanted to ask one more question, which is, if a publisher listening to this is like, how do I get involved in Gleba? What are their best avenues for doing so? If they're like, oh, I would love a list of booksellers and what arcs they want, or if they have an author coming up from your region or something like that.
Yeah, best first step is just to reach out to me directly. If you go to the Gleba website, you can get my phone number, my email address. Our executive coordinator February, her info is also on there. That's the great first step. Just give me a call, introduce yourself, and see if you fit into any of our programming. And we are also super open to, if you have any cool ideas of things you want to do, we're always on board to do that or push that or work with you in some new and fun way.
I imagine you sitting there in your book-lined office thinking about promoting punk shows and applying those principles to book selling.
Oh, absolutely.
Does that happen? Use those thoughts into your brain.
There's your soft question.
For sure. Yeah, like this is a perfect example. Like the Hanif event we did like a little pop-up Hanif event. And I was like, I'm gonna do like a punk rock show poster for this event. There's nothing to do with the organization, but it's got the like ethos, and it's fun and it's cool, and it'll attract some people. So yeah, I'm always thinking about that. Our listeners
should also probably know that you're an artist and you make all sorts of
prolific artist. Mm-hmm. And
tube
spoiler alert, we haven't I guess we'll break this news right here. We will be issuing some Larry Law unlimited editions of original artworks, which will be available through Microcosm. So this partnership works both ways.
About that, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the program, Larry, and talking to us. Sorry we're a little low energy today here in our hoodies.
No, you're fine.
You may beware us at high energy, but what's new?
No, thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this. This was really great.
I'm going to take that.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub.
On Twitter at Microcosm.
On Facebook at Microcosm Publishing.
On Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.